If you go to graduate school in the future, you want to do something related to food science. I know most of you go to medical school, that makes sense. But some of you, if you're interested in that, you can join their summer section. They have some certification programming online, it's very nice. You know, you can get a certification, have a 2-day short course, pretty nice and a pretty nice deal, not too expensive. They do lots of remote training so recently because of the outbreaks. Okay, there is something I want to mention for FISMA. FISMA is not cover everything. FISMA gave flexible for small farmers, especially in West Virginia. They gave flexible for the small farm if their 3-year average sale less than 500,000. If they are distributed in-state within 275 miles. So if you have a farm in Charleston, you're going to sell in the produce at farmers market in Morgantown, you're okay. The FISMA is not going to be covering you. Also, major distribution end user is the consumers, restaurants, and retail foods. So they do give you flexibility. So for small farms, what you should do? There is another old regulation comes out called GAP. It's not a close, okay? It's not a close called GAP. I wear that all the time. That's called Good Agriculture Practices. It is another comprehensive system for reducing foodborne illness, spread primarily in microbes, covered from all the way from farm to the table, before planting, during production, during harvesting, and post-harvesting. It's a quality assurance procedure. This is the whole document talking about GAP. It's a collaborated results from United Fresh Produce Association and the FDA. This whole document talks about guidelines to minimize microbial hazards for fresh fruits and vegetables. This is also part of the FISMA plan, but it's come out very early in 1998. What this really talk about? It's very heavy, not too heavy, 100 pages. What they talk about? 4 major items you should always remember. Safe soil, clean water, clean surface, and clean hands. What is safe soil? Manure compost. Don't use fresh manure, I just mentioned. What is clean water? Don't use well water, is that right? Well water has to be filtration or maybe chlorionization. Make sure that no fecal contamination, no coliform, no fecal coliform. What means clean surfaces? Physical and chemical sanitation, no biofilm. If you biofilm, it's difficult to control. What means clean hands? You know this all the time. Wash hands at least 25-30 seconds using soap, antimicrobial soap. How do you make sure it's 25-30 seconds? Sing a happy birthday song. Is that right? You're not going to count 30 Mississippi. You're going to sing a happy birthday song. That will be 25-30 seconds. So safe soil, clean water, clean surface, clean hands is the key points of the GAPs. In the United States, we do have a surveillance. These are the 3 major agencies responsible for the safety. First of all, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This acronym will be tested in the final exam. Don't forget prevention. CDC is not Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They didn't put P there. What they do is PuzzleNet. PuzzleNet is using a geoelectrophoresis, which is a fingerprint technique. There's a database. They run the pulse field geoelectrophoresis. If you have an outbreak sample, they compare to the bands. If you have only a small bands difference compared to the database, it's identical as a pasture. So let's say I have a database, Listeria monocytogenes, ATC51001. I have an outbreak coming from Cantaloupe. I run the PCR of your sample. If you isolate Listeria and my database Listeria only have 3 bands difference, which means they're identical, that can be identified as Listeria monocytogenes 50001. That's called surveillance. Now, what is FDA? Food and Drug Administration. Now, not only for the drugs, they are also for the food safety. They are responsible for domestic and imported foods. in the exception of meat, processed egg, and poultry. Because meat and processed eggs are responsible for USDA FSIs, that's Food Safety and Inspection Service. You understand the meat and poultry. What means processed egg? You have a hamburger. You buy a hamburger with egg sausage from Dunkin' Donuts. That egg is processed egg. If anything happens, FSIS will take care of that. How about raw egg? You buy a bunch 12 cage eggs from Kroger. Anything happens there, salmonella contamination. That's for FDA. That's the difference between raw egg and the processed egg. Okay? So just briefly to show you what I did. This is my lab data from USDA for research grant. We do the 3 steps wash. We'll compare a water rinse antimicrobial dip and the water rinse antimicrobial dip each 10 seconds to see the pathogen control on the fresh produce surface. First of all, never do use antimicrobial dip first. Because soil dust will neutralize antimicrobials, especially chlorine. We'll mention this in Thursday real quick. What are the sanitizers we're using? We're using Sanidate. Very expensive. It's a mixture of peroxy, acetic acid, and hydrogen peroxide. Chickside, which is vegicide, and lactic acid, citric acid blender. The last one is chlorine. Chlorine very cheaper, $5 1 gallon, 100 ppm parts per million, killing 99.99% bacteria in 5 seconds. However, if the chlorine solution is combined with soil dust debris, the impacts will be dramatically dropped. We'll mention on Thursday. Chickside vegicide, $100, 2.5%, 5 gallon per. It's a lactic citric acid blender. Long time ago, this is doing for the chicken products. However, they have find a problem. Because lactic acid will make the chicken leg looks like very yellow. It's a discoloration. They try to solve the problem. So they're doing the lactic acid, citric acid blender. Sanidate is expensive, $300, 5 gallon pack. I had it in the lab. A mixture of peroxy, acetic acid, and hydrogen peroxide. It's approved to be using organic produce. So that's why the local farms are very interested about that. What we do, our research found it. You could use all these things. And you indicate that 0.25% Sanidate and 2.5% veggie solutions, looks like very similar. They are good alternatives for chlorine water. Nobody likes chlorine because chlorine have a chlorine byproducts could generate. This is we do the plants on-site validation study in the Preston County workshop in Reidsville. And we did a squash, 3 steps wash. We do the storage, we test APC, we did it in the lab, coliform, fungi, lactic acid bacteria, cyclotrophs. We did the on-plant studies. What we find? Using Sanidate can extend the shelf life 50 to 70 days. And we didn't find the difference between 0.007% and 0.5%, which means do not overuse antimicrobials. It does not mean you increase the sanitation concentration will have good impacts. That's not necessary. What is the cost? The cost is a range $480 to almost $2,000 if you produce 1,000 to 5,000 squashes. Not too expensive. This is the one we supported by the USDA. And we have a fact sheets which is spread out to the farmers markets for some people to see. Okay? So that's very briefly, we talk about all these things. Give you an overview of everything happens in the United States regarding food safety. If I miss something, you can go back to see my Zoom recording. I'll put on the campus room.
We have lab today, right?
Yes.
Yeah.